Hey, can you hear me, Brent?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hi, Rob.
You're muted.
I'm muted?
Yeah.
You can't hear me?
No.
Oh,
I can hear you. Rico's
Oh.
computer is the broken one.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I did have. Hey,
Is your
Rob, what's
volume?
up?
Amazing. That was really good. Okay, good. I'm so glad, Rob, you were on the call at that point because I'm like, what's broken in my machine? Oh, that's amazing. Cool. So we have at least Casey joining us.
Yeah, and Jonathan and Astro should be here too.
Awesome. There's also two on the dock. How's your day going, Rob? I should mention while we have a second, thank you so much for giving Walk a spin. We are hard at work getting some stuff out, getting this release out the door, and as soon as it's out the door, I'm going to turn around and ship fixes against that. So I really want to get it scheduled and like running on a regular basis, even if it's just like a trial. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I'm not gonna complain about it because I'm too busy to do anything on it anyway. Right? I'm not gonna complain about it until I'm like, you better work on this, or I'm just gonna do something else on my own. I'm
Totally.
definitely like not at that point.
That's good. It's good. Yeah, and I think it's nice to have like an opportunity to get us, like, now that we have these scheduling tools that'll come out, like to get something that really it's a really great test case for us because it's such a long running process, right? Like does query properly, start that, wait for the exit code, and then like properly shut that down. I think is like a really good thing to be making sure that it works properly. So it'll be fun. It's gonna be a bit of a ultimate challenge, but we'll see. So here's hoping. And the question is going to be which piece of software is more broken, right? To like make sure the crawler works right, and then make sure the scheduler works right. Oh, but yeah, did it together on Tuesday. Has everyone done their readings?
Oh, that's tomorrow?
Mm-mm.
No.
I have to finish the Kathy Weeks part and the potlatch thing.
I haven't done the potlatch one.
I thought there was I really enjoyed the design for plurality.
Yeah, I really like that one too.
That was a really interesting reading.
Yeah.
I really want to read the rest of the book.
Yeah, I liked the like what is work, or like the questioning of work relationships sections. I thought Kelsey did a great job of like pulling the right tidbits that were really useful. Normally like Marxist talk gets me like really like meh, but that one actually got me to kind of engage. I was excited.
She got me to actually read my first Cory Doctorow book because every time I've picked up one within like the first 20 pages, I'm like, too preachy, done. And I'm like, I have to read farther now.
He's asking a little preachy. It's very, very true.
Hey, Astro.
I think Casey's having trouble connecting to the internet. Find out.
So question I had about query, I was reading through some of the docs and noticed some issues. So I just submitted a PR for one really dumb, simple one. But it seems like there's this giant PR that's been sitting there for a long time that doesn't match up at all with like what currently exists. And there's a huge pile of like to-do kind of issues. Are you planning to like massively revamp that site, or is it just like lots of little work that needs doing?
Totally see what you're saying there. Yeah, I don't think we want to get in the way of a revamp. Like we are planning on overhauling. This is the website repo, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So no, I don't think we ever want to say like don't do work because massive revamp coming. I think that that's like a great way of saying let's not maintain our documentation. And so yeah, I think we are planning some overhauls, but there's nothing that says that we shouldn't be including the like fixing things now. Oh, Casey has the wrong Zoom link. That's what's going on. Okay, one second. But yeah, the Rico, can you paste that in?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the one that's fallen behind the PR that Dustin opened that like fixes some spelling mistakes and some other things. I should have actually closed that a while ago. I'll close it after this call. Mainly just we have an automated process for producing that documentation, that part, and so we actually should close that PR because it has since been fixed, and that's why it's like conflicting on a bunch of places.
Gotcha.
Cool. So Rico, I'm going to stop stepping on your toes if you want to kick off with me.
No, I think we're about ready. Astro, can you hear us? Just want to make sure that you're online.
You can also type in chat.
Yeah, if that's easier.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. I do apologize. I'm in my car.
Oh my
God.
Any noise? Yeah, I couldn't find a quiet meeting spot in my office, so
You're not driving or anything, are you?
No. I'm just parked.
Okay. All right. Well,
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, it's going above and beyond. All right. So if there are any objections, let me know. But I'm going to press record so that everybody who listens to this later on can benefit.
I think we're already recording.
Oh no! Oh really?
Yeah. It's just recording in the cloud in the top left, but it's all good. It's too late. We can trim it.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
We can edit it down.
Great. So thank you guys for joining. This is going to be our second sort of tight-knit little community call. I think I sent around an agenda on a HackPad in chat, so I think everybody can see it. Well, yeah, this is a Zoom question, but do you have to, once you join a call, are you available to see everything that was chatted before you or no? Okay, cool. So thanks, Brendan, for posting that again. This one's going to take a little bit closer to a format of what we expect an ongoing call to be, unlike the kickoff one that Brendan led last time to sort of shape the whole purpose behind why we're doing these. So I'm hoping to get a little bit more into some specific feedback on opportunities that you guys have had to try out Query and open up the floor for you guys to let us know what you've tried, what's worked and what hasn't. And for us to collect some feedback on that, as well as walk through a specific use case that I keep imagining. So going through the agenda, I think intros we can skip because this is basically the same calls we did last time, but I'm going to kick it to Brendan, who will talk about some upcoming release stuff. And then I'll walk through the data project that Casey and I did together to build a data set from some web scraping. And then I'm really hoping to turn it over to Query users, and that includes everybody who's building Query as well, in terms of surfacing some issues, ideas, and bugs. And to reiterate something Brendan said last time, we're really hoping that as much of the conversation that floats up can be pinned back down into specific GitHub issues. So that'll be sort of our goal of collecting the feedback that gets surfaced. Any questions about that before we sort of really get kicked off? All right, cool. So Brendan, Casey, and the whole dev team have been working really hard on 080 from the back end. So I want to give him a couple minutes to talk a little bit about what can be expected to change. And I think Astro works from the command line in most instances. So I think you do have a pretty good audience for explaining what will be capable on the back end in the short term.
Very cool. Thank you, Rico. So I think a couple of folks have already, stop me if you've heard it. If any of this is like old news, let me know. We've been working on the 0.8.0 release for a while. A lot of it includes some like the sort of high level set of changes are, make sure we've made a bunch of changes to Starlark and the way that works to sort of open up some new data set types, which is sort of, I think, but keeping it high level for a second. There's some changes to Starlark there's a whole bunch of like command line, make it work nicer, make it work better stuff, just like kind of housekeeping. And then the other really big thing is actually to our build system, the way the query builds. So the backend is this, and 0.8.0 is, we're just talking about the backend release. We'll be following up in later weeks with a front end and user interface changes. But we'll probably issue a very quick 0.8.0 on the front end as well, because we also have some updates there, mainly sort of cleaning up stuff and making things work a little better. A lot of that is work that Casey's done, and so maybe she'll introduce that on the next dev call. Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is it's worth just starting with the kind of boring stuff, which is just the build system. And we had a dependency on a project that used a type of package manager called GX, and which we don't need to get into too much, but we've removed that and we've switched over to more sort of traditional Go systems and tools, which took us a little longer than we expected. But we're very, very happy with what it's going to do for us overall. The end result is like anybody who's sort of like operating on the bleeding edge and like building query from source code, which is actually a lot of the people that use the project do that. It should be a much more pain-free process now. On the dev side, we're getting some advantages to actually be able to independently update stuff, so we can cut new versions of packages that query depends on and then slowly upgrade them over time without breaking everything. For a long time, we've had to make it so that every single part of the query sort of build system always works. And now we can actually version those things independently. And so for us, I think that's really exciting from the perspective of just like working a little easier. I don't know if anybody was following in the Discord chat. Jonathan trying to get query to build on Windows was a bit of a nightmare, and a lot of those nightmares were caused by these like challenges to copying around a lot of folders and directories, and that was sort of caused by the package manager. And we're now using a system that is a lot more people are using, and because more people are depending on sort of the standard Go module system, it's going to be a lot easier to sort of build query in a number of places. And Dustin's not on the call, but he's been making a bunch of progress on like getting query to build on like BeagleBones and Raspberry Pis and Windows boxes and a whole bunch of other things. So I'm generally excited about that. It's easily the like least interesting part of things, but yeah. And so for this call, I think the thing that's most worth bringing up is our changes to Starlark. And so I think Rico's going to be talking about his MLB blog post later. And after working through that, we got a lot of feedback around the way that our HTML parser works. And the Python community is used to this package called Beautiful Soup, which is a tool for working with HTML documents. And so we've actually written a new package into our standard library that works a lot more like Beautiful Soup, which will hopefully make the sort of process of moving into query a little easier. And so that we'll end up, what I'd like to do eventually is we'll like write a update Rico's blog post around the HTML parsing stuff and make sure that we can do it all with the new package, which if it's better, then great, we'll publish it. But if not, we'll talk through it and make it better until it is. And then the other thing that's really worth noting is some of the data sets we talked, I don't know if any of them we talked about last week are sort of this like time series base. What would be a good example? But anyways, long story short, we now have, the way the query works is you used to define this function called transform, and you would get a data set. And in the past, that data, for technical reasons, that data set was actually blank. And what you had to do was fill in the changes that you wanted to make, and that would be applied to a previous version of a data set. We now hand you something a little more useful. We give you the prior version of the data set. And so now you can actually say, hey, how many rows are in this data set right now? And I'd like to add 5. And that makes making these sort of append-only data sets much easier to build, or data sets that examine the way that the world currently looks on your document, and then sort of just make changes based on that a lot easier to do. And so that, for us, it took us a little while to figure out how to do that properly, mainly because we want to make sure that we can always sort of like play your change history forward and in reverse. And we had to make sure that any changes that you make manually and any changes you make with a script sort of don't cross over and step over on each other's feet. And so we figured that out. And I think that's one of the more exciting aspects of what you can do now with transform scripts. You can now build these really fun append-only logs, which is you just keep adding rows to the end of a body. Which happens a lot in different types of data sets. And then last but not least is this update service, which query, this is sort of our big feature for 0.8.0, is the capacity to have query run updates for you. And so should I just demo that quickly, or I've already taken like 10 minutes. What do you think?
I was going to say, I was hoping you'd get to that because I thought that's like the highlight of the release and like the work of the last couple months. I think I would like to do that. I think I want to get on the record walking through the blog post and then walk into the problem of like, but what happens when the real world changes? And then I'll hand it back to you to show at least how on the back end you can write it so we can get updates to data sets. But yeah, keep going if there's anything else you wanted to add about updates.
No, I think that's it. I want to leave as much time for others to talk as possible. But yeah, so then, yeah, I think that concludes our updates on updates, and we'll do a quick little preview around how updates work after that.
Cool. I will take this back and jump right into a mini project that I worked on with Casey to web scrape some baseball data. I'm a big baseball fan, but this particular data set that I'm going to talk about just seemed like a really good baby's first data set. It's a really simple table that we wrote a script to transform and pull into query. And so I'm going to share my screen and just show you guys, can everybody see what I'm looking at? Yeah, okay. Why does this look all weird? All right, so there's this website, baseballreference.com, which is sort of the leading stats baseball page, well-respected and everything like that. So what we're looking at now is a table of home run leaders from 1 to 1,000 with a couple interesting sort of markers in their columns. So greatest home run hitter of all time is Barry Bonds. And what you see here is the rank, his name, how many home runs he hit, whether he bats left, right, or as a switch hitter, and then some links to his personal page and the sort of a profile of all the home runs he's hit. Interestingly, there's some really ugly data munging work that is created by the fact that the person who designed this table wanted you to see some other interesting bits of information, but doesn't make it terribly easy for you to see. So you get this little key at the top. And what we use that key to understand about this table is Barry Bonds played 22 years of Major League Baseball. Hank Aaron played 23 years and on down the line. Hank Aaron is in the Hall of Fame, as is Babe Ruth, as is Willie Mays, but Barry Bonds is not because there's no plus next to his name, and Alex Rodriguez is not, there's no plus next to his name. So you can imagine the obvious case where you might want to do some analysis comparing hitters against each other or whatever, and wanting to know who was in the Hall of Fame in a more simple, easier to manipulate way. Yeah, how is Barry Bonds not in the Hall of Fame? Yeah, that's a story for another time probably, but doping scandal in short, to put it shortly. So anyway, Casey helped me, or whatever, Casey did all this work, but we wrote a script together to do the kinds of things that anybody who would come across this list and want to do something with it would have to do. You have to go to baseballreference.com, copy and paste that table into some kind of CSV file or Excel, and then manually do some work to create new columns for how, whether the player's in the Hall of Fame or not, yes or no, how many seasons they played, how many home runs they hit. And so I sort of took some time to identify all of the things that you might want to know from the code that's basically that you have to crack inside of this data set before you can actually use it. And it was gross. But the sort of 4 big issues we were trying to solve at the beginning was, wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where you could benefit from the work that I did to clean up that data set? Because now every time someone wants to use that data set, they're doing that same cleaning work. With query, you could fork our code that Casey and I wrote and never really have to do that again. Wouldn't it be nice to trust that cleaning work by easily auditing and tracking our steps? So it's nice to not have to do that work, but who the heck am I? And can you trust the work that I did? Well, a script would allow you to sort of see step by step what I did to clean that data. Wouldn't it be nice, C, to know that if you had a different approach, you could take that work, copy it, and fork it, and adapt it as you saw fit. And so that's sort of the same concept. And then D, this is where we're going soon. wouldn't it be nice to have the script tied to the data directly so you could simply rerun it and retrieve updated rankings? So these rankings are going to change, obviously, as more people climb the ranks. And the ability to set data sets to update themselves would be really a powerful thing. And so we sort of built a script to allow you to do quite a few of those things. I don't think it's worth our time to go all the way through that, but I just wanted to illustrate that as a use case that when I talk about query, the most obvious example to me is web scraping data that updates in the wild and putting it into a structured data set that makes sense to me, and making it easy for others to audit or copy or fork as they see fit. Now that's only one sort of source of data. We've talked to a lot of different users who are interested in jamming sensor data that they generate on their own and publishing that, which I think is a wonderful use case that I'm far less familiar with because I've never tried to do that. But this has like opened up a lot of conversations I've had with friends of the project who sort of see a use for query for handling any data in the wild that's either not presented in the best way possible or that requires a lot of cleaning work, which also will update on a regular enough basis that it'd be really, really nice not to have to redo some of that cleaning work. So that is sort of like the blog post that Casey and I wrote really just walks you through the big pain points of the work you'd have to do to make that data useful for yourself. And then sort of the big issues that query, when it's all done, will make really easy for everybody to do. Any questions about that work? Like I said, we tried to make it the simplest sort of concept we could to make it really easy for anybody to follow, but happy to answer any questions if there are any out there. Yeah, Brent.
How long did it take you to write?
Oh my God, Casey?
Sort of a not weird question, but I was also writing, while I was writing it, I was trying to ensure that Rico understood everything that was going on. So it was a lot of like teaching moments rather than like, I just sat down and did it. It's really similar to a bunch of other data sets that I had made previously. So if I had just sat down and done it, it probably would have taken me like 2 hours maybe to make sure going through and the HTML that we pulled and making sure I was getting the stuff that I needed. Currently, it's also should be noted that so I believe you mentioned Beautiful Soup on this call already, right, Brendan? So this was made before we had the Beautiful Soup-like package, which actually made it more complicated. The HTML package that we used was a jQuery-like package. So you grab things using selectors, and it's not super intuitive. So yeah, maybe like 2 or 3 hours to make it. But like most of that is understanding the content that you're pulling, not understanding like the tools you're using, I guess. I don't know. But I would be interested in seeing how it would be different to do similar things, the web scraping stuff, using the Beautiful Soup package. I haven't really touched that yet, so I don't really have anything to say about it right now, but that's something that I'm definitely looking forward to looking at.
To build a bridge into the next conversation I want to get into, this sort of surfaced some ideas about what I'd want in an interface that would help me understand what a script is doing, especially that was like the very first Python script Python-like script I've ever even touched. So I've got a long way to go in terms of learning. But if I were just in the role of evaluating what a script was doing, having some kind of view, like a semantic view on what was happening to my data in some kind of right-hand screen. And to do that, if this is like common practice, then you can sort of ignore me. But the sort of inline note making inside the script to sort of explain what's happening was useful, but it made me think about sort of a story-like set of notes with bullets on the right-hand side to sort of say like, and this is the part where I create a new column that says Hall of Fame, yes or no. And if you can read Python, then you'll find that. But as someone who might only have 2 seconds and is evaluating someone's data cleaning work and not wanting to take all the time, some kind of interface that would allow me to do that simply would have been really valuable to me. So when I think about like different front-end views that we want to build, that's something that, like, if there's a lightweight way to do that, would have been very valuable for someone who is sort of stumbling upon a data set that came from some really rat's nesty sort of structure into something clean. Having some view on that would have been helpful.
Interesting. I think it's a lot like Jupyter Notebooks, which does that really well. It's like a nice, because you can type Markdown and like have it in, but like you have to be able to run Jupyter Notebooks. So I'll have to figure that out. It's like maybe that's just something we voiced over to that. But anyways, cool.
Very good. So the next thing is sort of peer corner. So transferring into letting the query team take a back seat to actual users outside of our four walls. We'd love to know what, if anything, you've tried to use query to do so far and whether it's worked out or not. And I think Astro sent me an email during the week saying she had success building a couple data sets from scripts. So I'd love her to tell us what she loved and hated and thought about that process if you're there, Astro.
Yeah, so so far I have been able to create a web scraper that collects all the voting records from the 2020 candidates. There wasn't much struggle or challenges that I faced on the query end, to be honest. It was more on the HTML parsing end of trying to figure out what were the tags that I needed to use to select the actual tables. And to actually not be able to have to parse the data too much. And so I was able to create a function that just kind of loops through all the pages of the candidates and actually pulls all of their voting records. But right now, the only challenge that I'm facing is trying to figure out how to select the tag that has the link to the actual resolution, to the amendment, or whatever that vote is. Because right now I only have the data set that says what the resolution is, if they voted yes or no, or if they were a sponsor, but I can't do much with that. I can't say what they were voting for. What does it mean for them to actually vote yes or no? So that's like where I'm at right now. I have a great data set of all the candidates, their voting records, yes or no, if they sponsored, but not much information on what that actually means. And so the difficult part is, the challenge rather that I was facing is trying to select the tag with the links. And the website that I was using was votesmart.org. So if anyone out there can figure that out or see where the tag is, that'll be very helpful.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
Astro, have you published your data set?
I have not. So I was trying to do that on Saturday, got sucked into work all day Saturday. But I am going to be, my push is this week to get something on GitHub so that you guys can see at least that first part of the script.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you should be able to just run query publish in the name of your data set, and that would actually be enough for us.
Oh.
And that
perfect. All right.
That command, I'm going to punch it into chat here, but it's just literally, if you're running for the command line, it's just me/dataset name. And if you do that, then we can actually search for it, and we'll be able to sort of give you direct feedback. And so,
sounds
yeah,
great.
Mainly because then we can see your script. But
yeah, thank you.
Huge, already huge.
Yeah, this is amazing. Oh my gosh, you did something and it worked. This is great.
Yay.
Yeah, as for the actual like art of pulling specific data sets or specific things out of tags, yeah, it's such a fine art form. I think there's a couple approaches that might be worth thinking about. One is like actually creating a separate data set of the, it depends on how much, because like what do we have? If I look at Facts Matter, we have votes, positions, ratings, speeches, and funding. But what feels like we're kind of missing is a list of resolutions and the sort of like some sort of semantically meaningful interpretation of that. So you're either trying to create that could be something separate that is realized from a different source. So if it was like House Resolution 101, I apologize by butchering the way that resolutions work. But and then even in that context, if that's coming from HTML content, then we still have the like immovable problem of like being able to do really artful selection that gets you a consistent structured piece of information. I think we should totally do like a tutorial on that, because it's a real art form, like learning how to select an ID and then say like, hey, I would like all of the anchors that are this, and then I want to filter that list some more. There's a lot to do there. Which of those, Asher, which of those feels more like your problem, like HTML issue, or just like not having a good source of data to begin with?
Ooh, I think it might be both, but maybe more of the access to actual data set, or clean data rather. Because like I mentioned, like I have all, the list of resolutions, but going back to your point of like having the list of actual resolutions, what do they actually mean to create any kind of sentiment analysis? So that's where I'm struggling on. I was trying to find if there's a way for me to create a for loop where it loops through all of the resolutions from all the candidates, and then maybe a separate data set of actually all the resolutions, and then it maybe pulls a few keywords from the list of resolutions and puts it into another feature column in the first data set. And this way I could maybe do some sentiment analysis. But at the moment, my biggest struggle is that trying to find that clean data set.
Totally. And this is at the federal level, right? That you're doing. Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. I totally think we should get an issue going around this and see if we can figure out, like, crowdsource some of the thinking around how to get a clean data set of resolutions. To me, it feels like a separate problem. Like if we had some canonical, because like the resolutions will have canonical identifiers, right? It'll be like House resolution and a number. Like I think that, and if you could focus on having that be a really large data set with like, that includes a lot of text and then keyword extraction, and then have the votes data set be a separate thing that you can then correlate. That way you can join them in different ways, right? We could, like, cause I think just the base data set of like how frequently are resolutions coming through, right? Like we often hear about how like everyone's about to break for a certain session. And so like you have this like this like set of resolutions that comes in really quickly, and there's a very fast, high frequency voting. It might be cool to just look at that in and of itself.
Actually, that's a really good idea. Yeah.
Cool. Then if you don't mind, why I think I will take the responsibility of opening up an issue on community around a host resolution data set. And then if we'll see if we can't get some other folks, other brains on this. That's a really, Asher, yeah. Sorry, Rico, do you have an idea?
No, I was going to say, chiming in with some domain-specific knowledge, I would encourage that any data set that refers to like HR1 or HR5 also include the Congress that it's in, because every time there's a new Congress, the first bill is HR1. And so that could present problems down the line if someone takes Astro's data and says like, no, actually Elizabeth Warren voted for Senate Bill 1 or whatever. And it's like, well, that was a different Congress. So like having some unique identifier, I'm sure that must exist on like Thomas. I can look for some ideas with that, but word to the wise.
Awesome, thank you for that.
It is a little shady that we don't have a like bills to English data like that. There's not just some website that you can go to that'll just really easily tell you what some bill means. Just thought that was weird.
Yeah, there's not. You have to do a lot of searching to even figure out what that bill is. Yep. It's a problem I'm trying to solve.
Yeah, they're designed that way.
I mean, what would be really interesting in that vein is to have like a Git style history of basically the law, because, you know, bills are really just amendments. They're just add this here and remove this here, which is part of the reason they're hard to interpret.
Yeah, we have Chris Wong is going to be starting with Query in July, and he tweeted about this last week, and about like he just pulled a random bookshelf off the shelf, and like he's like, this is a diff, because it's just like, as you said, add, change, move. Oh my god, that would be so much fun. I wonder how regular that is. Oh, that's such a machine learning project. Sorry, I get too excited.
All right, what else in Peer Corner? Peer Corner is this little space in the conversation for us to make sure that we're hearing as much from you guys as we can.
This is just sort of a random bug report that I was meaning to file, but some places in the Electron UI, because I think it's the same as the web UI, where there's links, you wind up like not being able, like it'll take over the UI and then you can't actually get back. You have to close the whole window, and as far as I can tell, I have to close the whole window and make a new one. So like there's on the structure view, there's a link to the JSON schema format, and if you click that, like you're just, the rest of the UI is basically gone.
That's great.
Thank you, because we have to use a special type of external link, because we need to tell Electron, and then we have to override that when we're compiling for the web, and we sometimes miss URLs that we hard code in, and so that's all it is. But thank you for that. If you spot those, it's super. Was it in any other places, Ron, or was that the one that jumped out at you?
That was the one that jumped out at me, and I think it's the only one that I ever tried to click. So I, it's just randomly happened to choose the bad one, maybe.
We spent a lot of time like making sure like the menu bar links work well, and like and if you like set the home URL of a data set that it properly links externally, but we didn't. Yeah, programming's hard.
Yeah, mainly I was screwing around trying to see if it would auto-generate like some basic JSON schema for me, which it at least doesn't do until you save a body. So I don't know, but I was hoping that I could like plop in a body and then go customize the schema and be like, nope, that should actually be this other thing or something.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, and we're actually pretty close to that. We have this thing called an unpack endpoint, which will give you it, but we haven't wired that up. Good to know that that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I want to encourage more sort of wide open space ideas about what your expectations are from the front end and what you hate and love. Just to sort of get this conversation started, Chris Wong, who's going to start with us in July, when we showed him the front end, he's like, who are these blobs, these peers? Do I know them? Are they my friends? Do they follow me? Can they see my work? So there's a lot of like sort of tooltip like information that is not available to you about who these folks are. The icons are big, they take up a lot of space. They don't have data sets on them. We sort of talked internally about making the blue one have environmental data, the red one have financial data, the green one have arts and entertainment data. We thought about the level of effort that would be required to sort of get that off the ground. And I'm just curious about your sort of early impressions of, seeing peers on there and wondering who they are, and just your impression of your time on the front end too is always helpful to hear that stuff.
I guess I would agree with him on a lot of those things. I haven't really like sat down and thought through all the sort of things that are like that, mostly because I talk to Brendan all the time, so I feel like there's a whole lot of stuff that I just pave over in my brain. It's like, oh, things that are works in progress, or like stuff just coming together. I'm not gonna be like nitpicky about stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, but also feel free to be nitpicky. We really appreciate it.
I think Astro's working off the back end more often than not too, so we'll probably have to get some front end feedback from Jonathan, especially. The other thing, so going down into like the discussion, how query can help, one of the things I sort of wanted to talk about on our first call was when we talk about how to distinguish our project from any others, we talk in terms of both the benefits that right now query is in the best position to provide, or what is the killer app. What set of features are so important or interesting to you that you download query just to get a chance to use them. And so we've talked a ton about keeping your data fresh via updates, version tracking, discovering interesting data sets, auditing each other's work. And we've sort of put that up against a framework we looked at about a year ago of all the different things you might want to do to a data set, from discover it, to ingest it, to munge and manipulate it, clean it, analyze it, visualize it, publish it and share it, and audit any work that's been done to it. And there are so many tools running at each one of those parts of the painful set of problems that we want to figure out where query is the best positioned to have the most impact. And so that's sort of prompted a question I like to ask in my mind for anybody who's basically familiar with the project, which everybody on this call is, which is either you can answer the question of, in your wildest dreams of a future state, what does query help you do on a daily basis? Or another way of asking that is, what, if anything, has query promised that you're kind of really waiting on, or like annoyed that doesn't exist yet, is another way of saying it, or really excited about? So we've talked about version history, and you can see the different commits. But when it comes to that, I would just love to like let you all sort of walk through some scenarios of the sort of features and benefits that we've talked about often that you're like, yeah, that's the one that I want, or you know what, you guys keep talking about this, but this one weighs a little bit more less on my mind. We can just let that sit for a minute. But
Silence isn't the enemy.
no.
So I know I brought this up when you all presented at TKH about data visualization. And I know there's some great features on that or on query already for data viz. Have you guys seen and I'm going to butcher the name because I always butcher the name. It's Google's package, the data viz starter pack or something like that, I think it's called. And so when I first heard about querying the data viz, I was imagining something sort of in that sense where you can upload any kind of data set, and right on there you can create your data visualizations without having to do any hard coding. So maybe considering that, if there's a way to create more data visual features within query where a user, or even not a user who doesn't have any coding experience but just goes on query and says, oh, this is a great data set, and I don't have Tableau, I don't have Python experience, I don't have access to Google Scripts or data viz, and I don't know how to use it, but this is a cool and easy way for me to visualize this data and maybe use it in my line of work.
Yeah, I'd love to kick that over to Brendan, who typically makes the case for why we've let this be just a basic HTML page that is totally in the hands of the user. Brendan, do you want to make that?
Totally. Astro, I just like jumped on this data viz starter pack. I'd never heard of it. This is amazing. It's like super, super, super cool. The reason that we have only ever done just like basic HTML is because we don't have the bandwidth to make a better visualizer. And one day we should totally build something that's better. But we've had to make decisions around like, cool, how can we make sure that we like cover all the basic phases? And which is just like, you know, we talk about the like data set value chain, and it's really important to be able to visualize data at all. And so we thought, okay, cool, we'll just do basic HTML to start, and then we'll try and come back and sort of figure this out. In my mind, I think it's interesting, Astro, like hearing you say this, I might sort of revise what was the former plan, but the former plan was to like figure out some sort of API for like understanding data sets more naturally. have you played with like pandas or NumPy at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, does that, to me, I always thought that we needed, like, I don't want to build pandas into query at all or NumPy into query at all, but having some like really basic syntax for like being able to say, I just want these 5 rows from a data set, or I just want this column from a data set, to me is like pretty important. And we don't really have like a great answer to that right now inside of query. We can do that in transform scripts, but like we can't really do it without the transform script. Like, I think it'd be really nice to be on the command line and be like, query get all of this tables whose row contain this value. So like basically just like filter. I always thought that we would do that, and then we would use those tricks, those selection tricks, to help in the visualization side of things. And from that to that end, like we never really sat down and thought through. We're just like, cool, one day we'll get to the visualization thing, and when we have time, we'll sit down and try and understand how that should work better. Even stuff like this data viz starter pack that you just showed me is like, it's such a valuable like gesture. And so like, if you have any other thoughts on the data viz side of things or what your expectations were, Esther, we should totally spin up an issue and talk about it. Mainly because like, yeah, we're trying really hard to like not design in a vacuum anymore. Like we know we've built the parts of query that we know need to work differently, and now we want to figure out how to make things work more naturally. And so yeah, this is really, really helpful. Particularly if that was like the big one that resonated with you. Because like you've also, at the Knowledge House, you guys played with like visualization tools inside of Jupyter Notebooks as well, right?
Yeah, we did.
And the data viz one like jumped out at you more than others?
We actually didn't use that one, but I was applying for a position and they were using it. And so I decided to just play around with it, and I thought it was a really cool tool. But I really like your idea of just creating at least the foundation of having people kind of like what SQL does, where you're able to just grab certain parts of a data set. And I think that would actually be a very important tool to keep, for now. Because even thinking about my project, like, yeah, I have 26, 28 candidates, but if I only wanted to look at Cory Booker, do I really need to download this entire data set and then export it to anything else and then query through that, right, versus just like selecting that part and then downloading that data set and using it?
Yeah. I think you'd always have to transfer the data set in its entirety, but I think for the command line, it's really important that you be able to like, or from any interface, you'd be able to just say, just give me the Cory Booker data. That's like really important, I think. It's like, and we have to be very careful about that interface where we don't end up building the entire universe into query again. But I think like, I would definitely draw the line at like, we need to be able to say, right now, the only thing you can do is limits and offsets, which is basically like, give me the first 100 rows or the next 100 rows. I think it'd be really important to have just like add a couple more like, hey, contains this string, contains this value, and give me this column, give me this section of a, just basically being able to do the other way. But yeah, very cool. Yeah, I think we should figure out a way to like talk about Viz as like find a place where we can just like put, just create an issue around that, because that is a really good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, Viz has been sort of something it's obviously on our minds all the time, but we've spoken most recently about it in terms of sort of building a hypothesis around why Viz being the reason someone takes an interest in a new data set and decides to dig deeper. So in almost every interesting, data is beautiful, obviously that's all Viz, but like any interesting data, like any big journalistic piece that relies heavily on visualized data sparks a lot of interesting conversations of, I would love to compare that data with something else. And it's usually, a Viz is a huge driver of inspiring you to want to dig deeper. And so we sort of know that like, there's all these other things about, making sure we do the updates right, and why am I losing the updates and diffs and all that stuff? And Viz is kind of on the back burner in terms of like where a lot of our talents. There's already a Tableau. There's already great other tools that do so much of that. But keeping our heads about us to make sure that data sets that are generated on query come out with beautiful visualizations that inspire people to come back to query to look at the source data is like a big sort of thing that we're not, it's a balloon that's like not too far away from what we're thinking about often. So that's just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to tack on to some of that, I feel like the piece that I'm reaching for, I mean, a caveat with like, to be honest, I've only really like tooled around with stuff a little bit, but is querying, and upon which you could build more stuff, right? Like I really want, like I get that like query needs to pull down a whole data set, and that's cool, but to like do interesting things with it, I really want or need to be able to like send a SQL query off to the query backend, even if that's running on my machine, which should be, to like get me something useful back, or a like a Mongo style query or a Mongo style MapReduce or something if it's a JSON data set, which is like this whole nother problem that there's like JSON and tabular data put together. But then the other reason I really want that is so that I can have query efficiently like do the joins and things for me when I want to do that, right? Because a data set is only a single table if it's like a table. And like the super useful thing is when you put stuff together, but I don't want to like make a whole new data set every time I want to put two things together. Like it feels like there's a lot of rigmarole there, and I just want to be like, I got this piece of data and this piece of data, and I want to put them together and give me like counts from one, or sums or something.
That's super helpful.
That's so good. Yeah, it's very much a return to the beginning of the project. We named it query.
Yeah,
we wanted to get there. And
cool. We're about 10 minutes from time, so I wanted to just sort of, we've got through everything that I really wanted us to sort of focus on in terms of walking through the use case that Casey and I worked on, and give you some project updates. And I really appreciate you guys chiming in with some of the things that you've tried to use query on, and surface some ideas and bugs and things for us to investigate. So if there's anything else anyone wants to add or ask questions about, this would be a great time. The floor is totally wide open. We don't always get users on the phone like this, so it's sort of nice to make sure we pick as much out of their brains as we can. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, Brennan, please go ahead. You should have cut me off when I moved right in.
all good.
All right, yeah. So we said Brendan can demo some of the update stuff from the back end. So this might be particularly interesting to Rob and Ashley.
I think I can do this in like 3 minutes, and maybe we can get everybody off in 5 minutes early, which would be great. Yeah, cool. So we now have query updates. So this is the thing that's going to come out in 0.8.0. Can everybody see a terminal and is it visible?
Yep.
Is that good enough? Okay, cool. So first and foremost, I do want to show Casey shipped a bunch of stuff around paging. So we now have this like nice pagination, which I'm very excited about. But the service that we now have is called Query Update. And if I hit Query Update, I see this new list of subcommands. And so the first one I think is worth, this basically just explains what you can do. So updates are, the way that we can do updates is there's two kinds we can schedule. One is just a shell script. So you can literally take I can do query update schedule. CH, if I can spell, and then let's scroll backwards through time and see if I have a shell script on there. Yeah, so like this is a test.sh, and so this is sort of how the commands look. Basically, you do query update schedule, and then you would name a shell script, which is and a shell script, just for anybody who's not familiar, is a series of bash commands saved to a file, which lets you do pretty much anything. Now we recommend that in that you update one data set and only one data set. You could theoretically update multiples, but then your script is not transactional, meaning that it's really hard to roll back if it doesn't work properly. But the last thing in that command, this R1PT1M, is a recurring date. So that what that says is repeat one time for a period of time 1 minute. So that means like repeat it once a minute and only do it once. If I were to delete this one, this would say repeat forever and do it every minute. I could do T1H for time 1 hour, or I could do 1 week for every week, or 1 year for every year. The syntax is a little on the back end, but this is what calendars are using under the hood. And so these repeating time intervals are very important. Eventually, we'd like to ship something called Cron Patterns, which is a different way of specifying time that allows you to say something like every day at midnight. In this case, what we're doing is we look for the last time the update was run, and then we just check for, hey, has it been a week? And you asked me to update this every week, and so we just check for that amount of time. But anyway, so that's how you schedule. I can actually schedule. I've taken. You can schedule multiple users, which is in this thing. I need to learn how to like undo things in the command line really quickly. But I can do update me MLB. What was this? Yes, MLB home run. So I've grabbed Rico's thing from this thing, and I can say, cool, update it, repeat forever, time once a week, and go check it once a week. Yes, I need a key. Cool. So now what I've done is I've scheduled an update. So now I actually have to start the update daemon, it's called. So if I do query update service start, this will start the service here, but this process will close if I close the terminal. So this only works on OS X, but if I provide this daemonize, which is a flag, this will register this in the backend. We're in the backend actually with our operating system. And so now Mac OS X is going to take care of making sure this process is running. And if it crashes, then it'll sort of tell us. But I can check the status of it by doing query update service status. And this is a little rough around the edges right now. This is actually coming back from the operating system, telling us, hey, this is the path that it's running. This is the process that it's running. Here are the arguments that this program is given. Eventually, we'll clean this up to be a little cleaner. But I can now also check. So what is happening is right now on my machine, this is running in the background. And so I can do query update list, which is going to show the list of things that are currently scheduled to be updated and the next time that they're going to run. I think that's actually, I have to do a little bit of cleanup around here because I'd really like you to see the actual time. Like it's like, cool, this is going to run in like 5 minutes. So that's something we'll ship quickly. But I can also check the log of what's happened. So I can do query update service or query update log. And so this is now the list of every effort it's made. And so red means the script broke, something errored, or something didn't work properly. Green means the script ran and successfully exited. And gray means it ran and it found no new changes. And so we can actually sort of see what happens. So I can get out of this, I can copy this and do query update log, and I can paste this in. And if I give log the name of a log entry, it will actually give us the terminal output. So what the shell ran when it happens. So if you're running a shell script, if you're running transform scripts and you have print statements in your transform script, so it's like, hey, I'm now going to this web page or I'm doing this. All of those would show up here in this log command. So you can actually see what happened in the background, which is really useful for when you've like something is run and it didn't work and you want to debug it, right? So if I do query update log and I see this like red one, let's find out what happened here. So this is trying to fetch the EPA data.json. If I do query update log and I give it this, it said no changes to save. And this was because I made some mistake in the way that this is programmed. And so it's recorded as red. But if at any given point I wanted to turn off the service, I can just do query update service stop. And that will turn off the thing and stop all of my automatic updates. I can restart it with query update service start. And that's kind of the whole thing. It's just giving you a feed of, it's running everything for you in the background and it's doing everything you need to sort of like produce for you a feed of updates. And as these updates are created, it's rerunning the transform script from the past if you schedule a data set. But you can also schedule a shell script that says like, hey, go to this database, create this CSV file, move this here, and then save this thing as this thing, and then put this into query. And so you have the power to do like all kinds of new stuff locally on your machine. All of that's not part of the data set, but it's present. Sorry, that's a lot. And it took longer, but any questions around that?
I have many questions, but we only have a couple minutes. So I guess like my top one is with the bash script that you sent to it. Mm-hmm. Like, does it have to be bash or can it be any executable? And B, like, is there any special tie-in with query there, or is it just sort of scheduling to run that script?
It's effectively just scheduling. That's sort of how we intended it. It does have to be a shell script. It has to end in .sh, and it needs to be an executable file. And that's just for now as like a starting point. We thought that was very important. So even if you wanted to like call into some other executable, well, you have a shell script, so you can do whatever you want inside of that script. So you can say, cool, connect to this database, go, or just run this binary. The exit code is what tracks for whether it errored or not. So if that shell script exits with status 0, then it'll give you green. If it exited with any status that isn't 0, it'll show up as red. It doesn't record error messages. So there's very little correlation to query. The theory is just there's so many things that query can't handle, like so many things outside. And so we want to be able to like bring that in and be able to automate creating new versions. We consider it a pretty advanced use case, but walk is the classic example that I really wanted to be able to have walk be this external binary that runs, and then say, cool, run this walk with this configuration. And when this is done, please add that to query as the next step. That's literally the thing I was working toward. Does that answer your question? Yeah, Robin, if you have follow-ups, we could totally do this on the interwebs. But yeah, so eventually we're hoping to build a user interface around this. And one of the things that we're really wondering is like, we think this is the beginning of kind of like a feed that would be useful, where it's like, cool, we think that we want to reorient the way the front end works, where you come in and it just, query's going to tell you, hey, since you last were here, this is what changed. We ran this many times, and like in a far off future world, here's the diff between the last time you looked at this data set and now, and we can show you like a very fast visualization of these 5 rows got added or this changed. And for us, to me, that's a really exciting world to live in. You can also configure updates to publish automatically, which means that you can actually be using your machine to be reinforcing this data bazaar. And so we're very excited about it. I'm clearly very excited about it. And I've taken you a minute over time, so.
Indeed. All right, cool. Well, yeah, we're at 3:01, so I, as chair of the call or whatever, will bring this thing to a close. But thank you guys very much for giving us another hour of your time. This is very useful for us, and people watch this. So thank you guys for sort of asking kind of questions on their behalf of other users too, so they can see the answers and sort of get all of our perspectives on what we're working on. And hopefully we'll see you next week and the week after. All right, y'all.
Everybody.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.